All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. So getting into 16.4, 16.4 is expected to be released in mid-December. We are targeting December 16th as the release date. So keep your eyes peeled for that guy out there. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about are some things that you may see, or if you're not somebody that is continually running the Verify license reports that we request, you may not see this, but we have added a couple new fields on our Verify license report. You may notice some new things in there, such as calling user count as well as unassigned device count. This is really what we're doing to start looking at different ways of providing licensing for folks and more aligning with what we're seeing in the environment as far as, Webex, Zoom, or MS Teams and user-based licensing. So really what this is looking at are the calling users. Calling users are users that have phones, as well as looking at phones that may not be assigned to any users. So essentially what we're doing here is just adding some additional information to basically more help align the licensing models with what we're seeing in the environment. Next thing I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about, and this is some more fun stuff, and this is going to be Webex Calling. We've added some additional options and shored up some reporting in our Webex Calling space. One of the things that you'll notice, again, also on the license report, let me go ahead and get down to a Webex location here, is you're going to see some professional user license and workspace license now identified in our Verify license reports. Again, this is really just here to help shore up some licensing and assure that you guys are getting the most value out of your system from a reporting perspective. All right. Next thing I'm going to go ahead and talk about is the Webex customer experience, something that we hear a lot about, and that's is Verify able to report on CS Essentials? And the answer is yes, but I'm going to be pretty straightforward. It does depend. There are some things that people are asking for that we don't quite have yet, and we're looking into from a development perspective. However, what we have added that we did not previously have the capability to do is provide the queue-based analytics on your Essentials queues. So you'll notice now in version 16.4, anybody that's running Webex with Essentials, those Essential queues now appear in your standard call queue reports. So as you're generating reports, you could simply click those call queues and generate the same fun analytics that you're used to with a non-Essentials call queue, but now with Essentials. That's going to give folks the ability to look at things like answer rates, abandonment rates, call volumes, users, but really all based off of your Essentials as well as your standard call queues and, of course, your hunt groups and things like that, as we have always had. So that is new for 16.4. We have a lot of people asking us to be able to add that in there. So we've been able to go ahead and work with Cisco and Webex and get those fields populated so you can now run some standard reports. I think there's going to be a lot more to come as far as Essentials goes, so keep your ear out for those and I look forward to being able to present some of the updates as we dig more into Essentials type analytics and get an understanding of what you guys are looking for from your experience with Essentials. The next one I'm going to go ahead and talk about is another Webex option. And this is basically here to help, I'll say, shore up some numbers that we were seeing with Webex call queues and hunt groups. So previously in Verify 16.3 and below, if you were running a Webex a call queue report, you notice that some numbers may have appeared to be inflated. And I'm going to go ahead and run a quick hunt group report to show you what that looks like. Now, as opposed to what it looked like previously. So I'm going to run just a quick detail report for this particular hunt group right here in Webex. And we can see we have 95 calls. Now, when I export this information, I'm going to add a little bit of statistics in here, because really what we've done is we've taken the data that was fed to us and we made it make a little bit more sense. As an analytics vendor, what we're always trying to do is obviously make sense of the data, not just provide data at face value. Anybody can do that, but as your analytics vendor, we want to make sure that the data is digestible, but also that the data makes sense to what you're seeing. So I'm going to run a quick report here on my hunt group. I'm just going to add some call counts and some call percentages into this report. We're going to take a quick look at it, and then I'll show you an example of what it may have looked like in your previous version. Now, in the previous version, the data wasn't necessarily wrong. Essentially what we were doing, and this is a report from a version 16.3 system, but essentially what we were doing is we were taking the calls at face value. In this case, we are looking at the same hunt group for the same data from the same date and time frame. We could see our total call count was 819 calls. Now that's not wrong. There were 819 calls presented throughout this call queue. And if I click on this, we can see each one of these is a call presented to the user on the call queue, or in this case, the hunt group. So what we were doing previously is all of these records were being counted towards the total value of the hunt group. So you would have an extremely, what appeared to be an inflated value for your total call count. But when you broke it down to your sequences, each one of these is just a sequence of events. So essentially what we were doing previously is we were taking the data at face value, showing that your call counts were 819, showing you how many individual calls came into the hunt group. So in other words, out of these 819 calls that went through, each one of these being a call on the hunt group, there were only 95 total calls. Right? So this information was correct. We could see and easily drill down to the fact that there were 95 calls. But what we didn't have was the ability to look at the answer rates and the percentage rates at the same model. In other words, they weren't looking at the total volume of calls. They were looking at the total volume of calls. They were not looking at the sequences. So we can see in this case, it looked like there were 233 calls that were answered at the hunt group. But that is answered in multiple places throughout the hunt group. In other words, the call got answered at the hunt group, and then the call got answered again at a user. So that call would essentially be counted as 2 answered calls. Now, working with our partners and our development partners, and again, we appreciate everybody's support out there, what we really did is we really kind of redesigned the hunt groups and the call queues to better represent the data you wanted to see rather than the data that was coming at face value from Webex. And again, this is why you have a vendor like us to be able to help make those improvements. So rather than having to sift through a bunch of data and come up with calculations, we do it all for you. All right. So looking at a new report, essentially in 16.4, you can see that our values have dramatically changed. We are no longer looking at every individual row when we're summarizing at the hunt group. So now what we're identifying is just the number of calls coming into the hunt group. But then our totals and our summaries, you can see here, we went from 83 answered calls, or I'm sorry, we went from, let me pull that report back up. Wrong one. Well, we went from 255 answered calls down to 83. Why? Because now what we're doing is we're representing the actual number of calls that terminated at the hunt group. We're not individually counting every leg that was answered. Now, does that mean that you're missing legs? Does that mean that you're missing something that was answered? Absolutely not. What you're doing is actually shoring up the numbers. Because if I take this report and then I add, let's say, end users or that are answering the calls, you're going to see all the end users or the calls that came into the hunt group, like my first one here, but you're also going to get to see those calls that were answered at the hunt group as well, or answered by the individual. So what this is doing is really shoring up your connected counts, your answered counts, and your voicemail counts or your abandoned counts to give you a truer one-to-one relationship to what came into the hunt group, what was answered, abandoned, or goes to voicemail. So this is a great improvement, and we'll dig a little bit more into this in one of our future webinars. So make sure you stay tuned and join those webinars in a couple of weeks where we talk a little bit more about some of the Webex analytics. All right, so the next thing I'm going to go ahead and float down to is a little bit of what we've done for some of our Zoom customers. Again, with every release, we will usually like to touch on a little bit of something for everything, or for everybody. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is our Zoom calling. We've added a few new fields to be able to report on. So in this case, we have called party type. So prior to this, we had caller device type, called device type, and caller called party device type, which would help identify the devices that were being used. But what we went ahead and added is caller or called party type. So this is great because now rather than having to search for individual call queues or individual auto attendants or any of the pickup groups available in Zoom, I can simply say, you know what, I just want to report on all of my call queues and build a report based off of all of my call queues. So this is, again, another great way to really just make things a little bit easier for everybody out there. And let me go ahead and get some data to show you here. Oh, I may not have any call queue data in this particular one, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit about those. So Now from that, you can go ahead and search individual auto attendants, Cisco rooms, common areas without having to identify the individual common areas or individual locations. Again, you still have the ability to report on all your common area phones, but this is just going to really simplify your life to be able to say, hey, rather than picking my individual common area phones, I want to go ahead and just report on all of them. So again, a great way to simplify your lives in reporting and being able to pull that information up in bulk. Now, the other big thing I want to go ahead and talk about here, and I'm going to go ahead and do a search that I normally don't recommend. And let's see what we can get here. Let's go ahead and do the previous day. And let's just take a look at some call records. So here I have 185 call records. So a big improvement to Variphy in 16.4 for all of our Zoom customers is now the ability to show cradle-to-grave calling. So anybody that's familiar with our Cisco call analytics, the cradle-to-grave calling will be very similar. This is going to be something that you may have been used to. If you're not toggling on and looking at the cradle-to-grave, is just a matter of coming into the report and enabling your start-to-finish reporting or cradle-to-grave, choosing your format. And essentially what this is now going to do, it's going to, much like we do with Cisco, like what we do with Zoom, like what we do with with MS Teams and Webex, we're going to go ahead and formulate all your call rows together for you. So as a call comes into John, gets transferred over to me, gets sent over to Charles or somebody else within our organization, we now have the ability to formulate all those call rows together for you. So it's not just a one-to-one call row relationship. I get to follow the calls from start to finish, see where they're being answered, where they're not being answered. So shout out to all of our group and all of our development partners out there that helped us create this logic. It's a huge advantage for us in the Zoom and a huge advantage for you guys as you guys are trying to track, okay, where did this call come in? Where did it go? Who dialed this particular number? How did it get transferred? Now simply toggling that on is going to give you guys the ability to see all that information from start to finish. So definitely a lot of folks that have been looking forward for that, and we're excited to go ahead and bring it out. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and talk about is going to be some changes to our connected licensing. If you missed what connected licensing is, I please urge you go back through our webinar library. We did a great webinar on what connected licensing is and some of the advantages of connected licensing, not having to send legacy keys back and forth via email, being able to update licenses on the fly. So we have a great webinar on how that functions. We have made some changes based on recommendations and what we've seen. So in a lot of cases, or well, I'll say in some cases, the Variphy system may be in a DMZ or it may be locked down. It may not have external internet access. Off the bat, we don't know that that's the case. In other words, we may send somebody a connected license. They may try to load it and it would fail because it can't get out to our licensing server to validate its own license. So what we've done in Variphy 16.4 is we actually added a test button. So this is a huge advantage for anybody that wants to know, hey, can I actually use connected license with the way my system is set up right now? If you go to your license, you have a test connection button. That's either going to come back with a successful connection or it's going to come back and say that it failed. If it does fail, we love to work with you guys. Connected license is such an advantage for our customers to be able to not have to worry about keys, license keys going back and forth. Expiration dates could be updated on the fly, things like that. So it's a huge advantage. If it does fail, we urge you to reach out to our support group. We're happy to work with you guys. Our knowledge base is chock full of information. It has what ports need to be open. It has what servers it needs to be going to. We see issues with certificates sometimes. Sometimes it's a proxy that has to be configured so that way it can get out to the licensing server. But we definitely urge you and urge all of our customers to take advantage of our connected licensing. It's been a huge advantage for a lot of our customers, as well as a time saver, not to have to worry about sending keys back and forth and license keys and being able to update a system without the customer or the end user or you guys having to actually do anything. We can update a server on our end or a license amount or a expiration date, and you guys don't have to do anything. That will automatically take place, and your expiration dates will be auto updated. Again, huge advantage for our customers, as well as for us to not have to email keys back and forth and find out who got it, who has access to the system, or when they're going to be in the system next. Just a few other things, John, and I'll get ready to pass the ball back to you. We have made some adjustments in the Variphy system as far as the way the as-built is working. We did notice an issue with the way the web access was reporting in our as-built and snapshots. It was actually reversed in some cases where If you were overriding the default, it would actually tell you that web access was not enabled when it was. So we did make some adjustments to our as-built reporting to better reflect whether web access is enabled or not enabled. Also, we had some customers that we were trying to run verify license reports. Again, that's the old report that we were able to use here. If they did not have CDR, and many of our customers will utilize our other tools like contact center or dashboards, or even just some of the call manager tools like change management, DID management without CDR analytics, they were having some issues and running into some error messages trying to run the verify license report. That has also been fixed in 16.4 as well. So any of the folks that may have been having that difficulty, we went, thank you for your support and your patience. We did go ahead and get that resolved for you. Another great advantage over here on the MS Teams side is with MS Teams, we have added the ability to more clearly number search, or let's say more wildcard number search. So prior to version 16.4, numbers come to us, and it's when we're talking about phone numbers and things like that, or extension numbers, we'll call them in MS Teams, it's a free-form field. So we would get all kinds of weird things in there, things you wouldn't expect in there. I mean, we literally had some emojis in there at one point in time. So obviously we had to do some work to kind of deal with that. And that has been resolved in 16.4, just better number handling with Verify 16.4 to be able to better handle all, the various numbers that you guys may have. So that, again, works. Anybody that was really, again, previously trying to use wildcards and things like that with our number searches, we have went ahead and made some adjustments. So you will be able to go ahead and get those back in there. Just to kind of give you an example of that, I've got some data, and we go pretty far back in our search here. Come on, Google, stop doing that. And let's go back to January to today and do an apply here. And that's going to go ahead and search anything with a called party number. In this case, prior to version 16.4, this would return some mixed results because we would receive some mixed results as far as numbers from extensions. So we have went ahead and shored up your system based on some of the recommendations, but also some of the things that we were seeing within various people's MS Teams environments. Another one we did go ahead and work with on MS Teams is we did find some issues. We had some issues when you were using your calling scenario searches. Occasionally it would, and anybody not familiar with this, calling scenarios is a great way to really isolate certain types of calls, answered calls, voicemails. Again, if you're not familiar with the calling scenarios option in the searching and verify, take a look at a previous webinar. This is a huge advantage. I love when we added this. But this will go ahead and allow you to just say, hey, you know what? I only want to see my peer-to-peer calls, or I just want to see my answer calls, and pull up anything like that. We have went ahead and made some adjustments. We were seeing some data that probably shouldn't have been in there, an answered call that wasn't answered, things like that. So we've made some adjustments with our background to better shore that up based on the logic that we're getting back from MS Teams. So with that, folks, the last thing that I want to talk about is the Webex update. So with Verify 16.4, and this is a big thing for all of our Webex customers, there have been some scope changes made to the Verify app in Webex. With any type of scope changes that take place against the Verify app, there does need to be a re-authentication of your Verify application user within Verify. This is an extremely simple step. We do have documentation out on our knowledge base on how to go ahead and do this, but essentially anybody after loading 16.4, we are asking that you go through and re-authenticate your Webex user. Again, that is because the scope changes within the Webex application need to be re-authenticated so that way Verify knows it is allowed to use the new scopes. That is something that does need to take place for everybody that does have Webex. So again, just an FYI on that. After you load 16.4 for all of our Webex customers, you will go ahead and need to re-authenticate the app. Again, that's a simple process. Come into Verify, edit your app, and then just click re-authenticate or authorize, and you'll go through the motions to log in with your Verify app user.
I just want to take a second and thank everyone who attended today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Our next session will be on December 11th, when Dre and Jim will show you MS Teams new features and changes in Verify 16.4, probably a little bit more than what Vic covered here today. But thanks, and have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks all.